We are now ready to start Chapter 10. And before I actually start to look at the individual script files, I want to take your attention here to the schema picture. And I want to focus on the zip code table. The next topic is how to insert rows of data into a table. And I actually should back step a minute and say that the amount of material that we have left for the rest of the semester is probably the easiest material of the semester. Your last and fourth test is probably, I'm not saying probably, it is definitely the easiest exam that you will have of the 4 exams. And you will see why as we start to cover this material. I have often thought that these chapters should be at the beginning of the textbook, but the authors always had them as chapters 10, 11, and 12, so that's what I went with. But it is my thought that the material we're about to cover in the remaining 3 chapters, I think you will find to be much easier to deal with than the previous chapters. And the last test, test number 4, not only do I think it's the easiest material, but it is the shortest exam of all. So you're on the downhill slide of the course material. Okay, having said that, what we're going to do in Chapter 10, the first part, is how to insert data into a table. Well, we're going to talk about the zip code table. That's the table we're going to experiment with. And we're going to say we have some new students at our college. Maybe they're from Lime, Ohio. And so we need to put in the zip codes for Lime, Ohio. And that is what the insert command will do for us. So before I go any farther, I need to really focus on this. In fact, I'm going to increase the size of this and then move it over so I can really focus on the zip code table. I want to focus on the fact that, number 1, the name of the table is zip code. We need to take a look at each of these columns. The zip is the primary key. Remember, that's what this little tic-tac-toe sign stands for. It's a primary key, so all of your zip codes have to be unique. The asterisk here means that it's required. You must, in fact, give a zip code. And the A stands for the fact that it's an alphanumeric column. I know that seems kind of funny because zip codes are numbers, but it is defined as a character column. I also want you to notice that the next 2 columns, the exact names, are city and state. You have to commit, just for about the next, for the duration of this video, I need you to almost commit to memory these exact names: zip, city, state, created by, created date, modified by, modified date. I also need to call your attention to which columns are character and which ones are date. This particular table has no numerics. There are no numeric columns. We have either character or date type columns. I also have to call your attention to the fact that city and state are allowed to be null. That's what the O stands for. The asterisk, which is next to all the rest of them, means it's required. We have, like I said, we have 2 dates, created date and modified date. This symbol here stands for a date type column. So you need to refresh your memory on all of that because you need all that information in order to add some more zip codes to this table. And that's where we're going. So again, if you need to pause the video for a second to kind of memorize this, the names, the table name, the column names, what's character, what's date, what's allowed to be null, what's not allowed to be null. The zip is the primary key, meaning no 2 zip codes. You can't add the same zip code twice. No 2 zip codes can be alike. And then finally, that takes us, given that, let's go ahead and go to this place in your script book. Chapters 10 through 12 is where we are, and I'm going to just read this from the top. 10A, insert is the new command. We're going to put a new row into the zip code table, and here are the rules. You list the values in the default order. What is the default order? The default order is the order in which you see them here. Zip is first, city is second, state is third, and so forth. That is the exact order in which you identify the columns or you refer to them. So that's what I mean by the default order. What's first, second, third, all the way through the 7th column. Keep going. You insert character and date values within single quotes. I have this in yellow and red ink because it's just such a common mistake. Anytime you're inserting a date type column, this is the exact format you must use, including the single quotes. And you do not enclose numeric values inside of quotes. The new command is insert into. Those keywords will precede the name of the table. The values keyword will precede the set of values that you actually want to insert. And we're going to go ahead and move down here, and I want to show you there are two versions of the insert command. The first one uses what is called the column list. Now let me just real quickly show you. This is the column list, complete with the parentheses. Do you see what I mean by column list? I am listing the exact column names inside of that shaded area. Zip is my first, city second, state third, and so forth. I'm actually listing my column names within parentheses. That's what I mean by the column list. So the reserved words, insert into, followed by the name of the table into which you're inserting a row. And then you have the column list inside of parentheses, exact column names, every one of them separated by a comma. These are, remember the delimiter, we call it a delimiter. And then finally on the next line you have the reserved word values, and then you have the value list. And that is a list of values inside of parentheses, but you have to match these up. The first column listed in the column list is going to correspond to the first value. And again, this is a character column. You have to have quotes around the 45804. And that 45804 will be placed into the zip column. The second item in your values clause will correspond to the second column in the column list. So the city Lima will be placed in the column city. The value OH will be placed in the column state. The value SIMI will be placed into the column created by. Please pay attention to how I've coded this date. It's going to be placed into the column called created date, which is a date type, so you better be coding this according to the default date format. The word SIMI will be placed in the column modified by. And again, modified date is a date type column, so you better be coding this in the default date format, and I did. And those exact values will be placed into those exact columns of this new row. Now, the second method is usually preferable. If you take a look at this compared to this, the only difference is I don't have a column list. And that's perfectly okay. It just puts a little more pressure on you to make sure that you do in fact include all 7 columns and you do it in the default order. Zip is first, city second, state third, created by, created date, modified by, modified date. You have to make sure, because you don't have this column list to keep checking yourself by. If you don't want to include the column list right here, fine, but make sure you do include all 7 columns and in the correct order, and you have the right formats, etc. So obviously number 2 is going to be the method most people would choose. I just wanted to show you that the column list is optional. Now, what I typically do, what you will see then when this script file is actually executed, we will have added 45804 with its information and 45802 with its information. And I just feel better. I feel better checking myself. So I will real quickly do a select statement, select star. Remember, that's the wild card. We introduced it way back in the beginning of the semester, which means select all of the columns. But I only want to see them for the 2 rows that I just added. Now, what we are doing here, and this is the first you've seen this, we are manipulating data, and that's what these last chapters are doing. I'm showing you the commands that are called data manipulation commands, or DML, data manipulation language. They're part of the SQL language. It's just kind of a subset of commands that are designed to manipulate data. And because this is a data management, database management scenario, and you are supposed to be the data administrator or the SQL programmer, you are like the mama bear taking care of your baby bears. You're very protective of your data. Anytime any data is changed, edited, modified, manipulated in any way, you do double checks. And so any DML command, which the insert is the DML command, isn't automatic. You have to check yourself, which is what we're doing in this select statement. Then you have an option after you check to see if the data appears to have been inserted properly. You have to do one of 2 things right here where I'm highlighting. You either have to give the commit command, which we are not going to do. In reality, you would do it all the time. But you would either say commit, yes, it's right, commit this as permanent changes, or you would say, I changed my mind, I don't want to add these rows after all, so roll them back out. So you either follow all your DML commands either with a rollback or a commit. And as I said, in real life, you would do the commit. And us in a classroom situation, I don't know what you've done, if you've made mistakes, if you're doing it properly. So the safest thing for us to do is every time we add some rows, we'll just do the select to make sure that they added correctly. But we will then say, go ahead and roll them right back out. And then, because again, I'm being very cautious, after the rollback, I'm doing the select again to make sure they were removed. So the first select is to make sure I added them properly. The rollback takes them right back out, and the purpose of the second select is to make sure they were removed, so the opposite of each other. So let's go ahead and go here to our SQL command and do @10a. Let me maximize my window here. The first thing you want to look for is one row created. That's the first insert command. Then you want to look for one row created. That's the second insert command in this script. This is the select statement. Right here you see the select statement is showing you, and everything was added properly. You can see those are the zip code, city, state, etc. All the data was added properly. But then we went right ahead and we rolled them out. So it says rollback complete. That's what you get from the rollback command. And this no row selected is what you get when you did the second select statement, because they're gone now. You rolled them out and now they are gone. So it confirms all of those steps. So be careful there that when you're doing the insert, that as I've said, the rules apply. Make sure that you have you're accounting for all of your columns. Make sure you're using the default date format if it's a date type. If it's a character column, make sure they're in single quotes, and so forth. Okay, I'm going to move on then. Let's look at 10b. 10b I've written and I've given it to you, and I deliberately, this is on purpose, this particular program will end in an error message. I want to show you that when it comes to primary keys, and the zip column is a primary key, I'm trying to do an insert command where I'm inserting 45804 and I'm calling it Lima, Ohio. And then I'm trying to insert the same exact zip code again and I'm calling it Elida, Ohio. Doesn't matter if you changed anything else. The fact is you are not allowed to add the same exact key field value twice. So let's go ahead, turn my page. Let's go ahead and run that @10b. And you can see it says the unique constraint is violated, because primary keys have to be unique. That is a constraint that is applied to them. And I violated that, so I had to take it back out. Okay, I want to go back to the fact that I showed you in the schema picture that city and state are allowed to be null. Well, what if we purposefully want to have null values from the very beginning when we're doing the insert? How do we do that? That's in 10c. So how do you insert null values from the very beginning? You can either specify, actually just come right out and say the reserved word null, or, and you may want to, if you have your book in front of you, you may want to make a note to yourself, or you can enter an empty string. Now this is deceiving the way this looks in the book. I'm right here where it says empty string. This right here are two single quotes right beside each other, nothing in between. That is not a double quote. It's a single, which is how we enclose, any character string is enclosed inside of single quotes. So we're just putting nothing inside of there, meaning null. So this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to add, this is what this script is doing. I'm adding the zip code 56789. The second column is city. I'm just using the reserved word null to say I want a null city. So a null value will be placed in the city column. And then I'm using the other method, this is a single quote right beside each other, to say that I also want a null value placed in my state code. And then these are the values for the others. And then I'm going to do as I did before. I'm going to do a select statement to check select just that particular row to make sure the nulls happen properly. I'm going to roll it out, which means it's going to wipe that zip code row right back out, and then I'll do the select to make sure that it was wiped out. So let's go ahead and do @10c, and you can see one row created, but what I really want you to focus on here is city and state have a null value. They look like just empty spots on the report. So the reserved word null, or using the single quote, did work, and then the rolled it right back out, and it confirms no rows selected. Okay, and then finally for those last four columns, it's so typical that your tables will end in something like this, because this is how we track who's actually creating and modifying our data, what actual employees that we work with are actually creating and modifying the data. So it's very common to use what I'm going to show you next. There are reserved words, user, and sysdate, and I'm going to show you. Let me go ahead and I'm going to give you this command, show user. This is a plus command, so it does not end in a semicolon or a slash, so I'm going to press enter. And it thinks my name is system, because remember when I logged in today, I did the connect command. And when you do the connect command, it says connect system/manager. System is my username, manager is my password. It thinks my name is system. In a real situation, if you were really employed somewhere, your username would probably be some combination of your first and last name. But the fact is, user is a reserved word, and it keeps track of what you called yourself when you logged in. So and we already know about sysdate because we've used it. That's a reserved word that is just what it says. It keeps track of the system date. So what I'm trying to say is, for those last 4 columns, it's usually very, very handy to just use those special names, user and sysdate, to plug in those last 4 columns. And that's what I'm doing here. So my name will come up as system, and today's date will show up as the sysdate when we run this. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's do @10D. And you can see here, I'm just only focusing on these last 4 columns. It thinks my name is system. This is today's date. It thinks my name is system, and this is today's date. So those all worked properly. Okay, I'd like you to pause the video and then try to do 10E. When you are ready, unpause the video, and we'll come back and talk about it together. Okay, 10E. You will have one test question where you will insert a row of data. It will be presented very similar to this, and I'll give you the exact values, and then you'll have to code one insert command. Now I want to look at this 10E, and it's referring to the instructor table, so it's very, very important that you look at the instructor table and you determine, this is it right here, you determine what is the primary key. Notice that the instructor ID is numeric, so for the first time we're going to be inserting a numeric value. Notice which ones are allowed to be null. All of those columns are allowed to be null. These are alphabetic columns, and we have a couple of date type columns. You have to know all of that before you can do the insert command. You have to be aware of all that. So having said that, let's go ahead and go back to this script. And I'm giving you the information, and I chose in the insert command to not use the column list. So consequently, you have to make sure that these values, the order of these values, matches up perfectly with the order of the columns in the table. In other words, instructor ID first, then salutation, first name is third, last name is fourth, street address, and so forth. The values have to be in this exact order from top to bottom. So you have to make sure you do that. And then what I also want to point out to you is, for the first time, this is how you do a numeric value. There are no quotes around it. Instructor ID is numeric. You have to be careful the case of the letter. I inserted a null value, so I just used the reserved word null. Zip code is a character column. You better put the quotes around it. It is a character column. And then I use user sysdate finally here at the end, and I have a select statement to check myself on it. So let's go ahead and run @10E. Again, the big thing you want to look for is one row created. It confirms your insert was successful. This is showing you all of the data is where it should be. Street address and phone are null, just as I had asked, and it confirms that we are done. Okay, now on the next video, we'll talk about the update command.